We did the first 2 chapters last time. Today we're pretty much just going to cover chapter 3, and we're going to make chapter 4 your homework. So you're going to have to read it. We couldn't get through it all in one day. So anyway, last week, or no, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whenever we did it last time, we talked about powerful people choosing love. And we started by talking about God's Hesed love. And we really like to use that word because often, if we just use the word love, it sounds kind of, I don't know, touchy-feely in American jargon. It just sounds like somebody's just crazy in love with you, right? But this is not really the picture of the Bible. But God is pursuing us, after us, faithful to us, reliable, dependable, all those really strong things, as well as forgiving and loving and generous. And that's really the foundation that we need to be standing on in order to share this love with each other. So by the Spirit, we can actually choose love even when we're scared, even when we're overwhelmed, even when we're angry. And God is working on that in us. And so we also talked about the powerless relationship dynamic. We should have a slide for that to remind you, but when we feel like a victim, and then we tend to recruit a rescuer to help us fight off the bad guy, and we find ourselves doing that, oh, poor me dynamic, right? That so many of us were, actually probably all of us, familiar with that. So today we're just going to go one step deeper, and we're going to talk about what's going on that makes us feel that, why do we get so powerless, for lack of a better term? Why do we step into that dynamic? And so what's going on in our hearts? We're going to talk about the spiritual battle that's going on that puts us in that unsettled, powerless place where we are reacting to pain or the fear of pain and not able to stay powerful.
So a question would be this: when things don't go the way that you like them to go in your relationship, and pain results, maybe you're uncomfortable, maybe you feel danger, maybe you feel stress or anxious. What is your typical reaction, or what are people's? You don't have to tell on yourself, but what are your reactions when we begin to feel that discomfort or pain or threat to us? Withdrawal, okay? Attack, getting defensive. What does defensive look like? Sometimes loud? Yeah. Someone else? Let's see, where's mine? What about you? That's right. Yes. Yeah. Okay, my slide is not looking like the way I wanted it to. All right. So from an early age, all of us as human beings, we learn to manage relational pain. We're going to use this word pain to kind of describe that whole range of responses to things that are uncomfortable. We learned from the time that we're really young to employ one of these. There we go. All right. Something's not quite right, but we'll get there. Yes, we are. So somebody mentioned attack or withdraw, and I think we're familiar with these terms of fight, flight, or freeze is typically what we do. And so when we move into adulthood, into our adult relationships, and we continue to look for strategies to avoid pain, it's not comfortable. And so at its core, whether we withdraw or whether we attack, at its core, that reaction to pain generally is, I need distance. I need to disconnect. I need to establish a safe place for myself. And so what we need is a new strategy because that old strategy of distance and disconnect doesn't work. And so that's what we're talking about here with the spiritual battle. This new strategy comes from, here we go. Oh, thank you. You fixed it. There it is. Fear. Let me go back. All right. I am sorry for this. We'll get there. Spiritual battle. There's a battle in our hearts between fear and love. Not the mushy-gushy love, but God's love. And we want to take some time to examine that. And the first thing to see is that it's a spiritual battle. Do I have my... There we go. There we go. Couple verses. There's lots of scripture that talks about this battle. 1 John 4:18 says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear." Fear has to do with punishment. Think about how that is exhibited in your own life. Fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. And then the second verse, God has given us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. And so it really is a spiritual battle. There's spiritual warfare going on. And one of the main characteristics is that our old sinful flesh, one characteristic of it is that we are corrupt, or used to be corrupt, with deceitful desires. Paul talks in Ephesians 4 about the old nature, the old man, the old person being corrupt with deceitful desires. And so that old person, when we live in the old person, we have desires that seem to us to be good, that seem to us to be appropriate for whatever the situation we might be facing. But Paul talks about that we have deceitful desires. And so one of the core issues in fear is that typically we can't even see that we're living in fear. We can't even see that it's happening. We can't see that what we're reacting to situations because we've grown so used to doing it. James in chapter 4, this verse has been so convicting to me for decades. And you're probably familiar with it. James says, "What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you?" When you're upset, when one of you is upset, when both of you are upset, what causes that? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? Wow. It really is about what's going on in each of our hearts. And so I think that one of the first things for us to realize is that because it's spiritual warfare, that we can't do this in our human strength. There's nobody in this room that's strong enough to overcome that. There's no one in this room who's strong enough to see on their own the deceit that's at work in our own heart. And so it's spiritual warfare, which means that we have to cry out to God on a daily basis for help, for deliverance. And I think it would be fair to say that if we aren't crying out to God on a daily basis for Him to help us see that deceit, to help us see the pride, to help us see the fear, then it means that we're not really appreciating that it's spiritual warfare. And there's going to be evidence in our lives that we are trying to do this in our own strength. And so much of the Christian life is about learning and admitting that we just are not as strong as we think we are. There's that Rich Mullins song that I think of, and that's the title of it. I'm not even going to try to sing it for you. But we're not as strong as we think we are.
So we can react without thinking, right? Everybody knows how to just react to something. If somebody jumps out at me, I'm just going to react. I'm not going to think about it. It just happens, right? And so the same way when I'm angry or when I'm upset or when I'm scared, I just react. I just shut down or I just lash out. And it's not that I'm intentionally trying to do this. I've learned it. It seems normal. And I just do it. Some people talk about the lizard brain. It's the part of you that is trying to keep you safe, and it just does it automatically. So if this is warfare, we have to have some training, right? We have to work at this. Nobody's going to send a warrior out onto the battlefield without him or her learning how to use their weapons or how to keep safe from the enemy or how to approach the battle. And so we need a strategy for how to reconnect when disconnection happens.
And so what we want to do this afternoon is think especially through the lens of fear and love. This contrast, this battle in our hearts between fear and love. And so let's look at fear for a few minutes and consider how it applies to us, how we exhibit ourselves. You know, when we feel fear, when we feel anxious, unsafe, overwhelmed, distressed, out of control. I've talked to some men, and I had trouble seeing this for myself for a long time until some things really hit me straight in the face. That all of these things, anxiety, feeling unsafe, feeling overwhelmed, feeling out of control or defensive, in danger of harm, all of those are ways to talk about fear in our hearts. And when we encounter that, when we're at that place, we usually bring the worst version of ourselves to the situation. And when we feel this way, our normal reaction is to create distance and to protect ourselves from whatever it is that we don't like. And when we do that, we usually try to control the situation. And the crazy thing is that reaction of fear is the opposite of connection. It's to create safety. It's to build a barrier. It's to build a wall. It's to protect myself. The opposite of connection. So I could think of my reactions to Carla sometimes. If I think Carla is being too emotional, if I think she's being too demanding, it makes me feel uncomfortable. It makes me feel unsafe. And if I feel that I've already done more than my share, my natural reaction is to withdraw. And in my withdrawal, to justify myself because of all these good things that I've done that I think are good. Sometimes it's good to check in back here. She's too far to reach over and do this. Maybe I'll stand here and do this. Maybe I'll stand behind her so I can watch her. No,
Not making it better.
I'm not making it better. All right. So if Carla's upset, my natural reaction used to be to hide. And I might not run into the other room. I'm too smart and dignified for that most of the time. Not all the time. But I may ignore, and sometimes worse, I may downplay that she's upset. I may just say it's no big deal. All of that creates distance. All of that is self-protective because it's being driven by fear. And, Carla mentioned the natural reaction like that comes from our lizard brain because there's no thought involved. It's just an automatic response. We just do it. And so the more I practice this pattern, it becomes a habit. And I get used to it. I feel completely justified. It's because, this is what I always did. Why would I do anything different? It's her fault, after all. I'm a nice guy. I don't deserve this. And so it's so easy to get ingrained into this pattern of withdrawal, my reaction to pain. And I don't know how it is for you, and you'll have some time to talk and think and pray as a group and maybe alone or as couples, but how often does that really happen in your own heart? There were many times where it never entered my mind that part of the problem could be my own instinct to just withdraw and to pull away and to protect myself. Another, talk about habits. One of the ways that this came very real to me is that, and I've told some of you this, over December and January, we worked through a pretty significant conflict that was pretty troubling, and we talked about it and talked about it and talked. Sometimes talking about it led to more conflict because there was just a bunch of junk there. But what was so amazing to me, because she was patient enough to listen, because she was patient enough to work at helping me understand myself, there were these 3 distinct events where I had really ugly, angry outbursts. And in each one of those, I felt completely justified in what I was doing because of the habit. I had developed this habit of being angry and thinking it was okay because I had all these reasons to explain it away. Now, I probably would admit that it was wrong, but I didn't really appreciate the significance of it. And I know I didn't appreciate the harm that it was causing our marriage by that bad habit. And so I built my, beyond that, I think it's your turn. Which brings us to the idea of partnering. No, is it still me? She's smiling. It's still me. That was earlier. So, let's see, what's next? Yeah. So part of this thing with fear is that it's so easy for us to partner with it. We want to introduce this idea of partnering with fear or partnering with love. And partnering with fear creates this environment where we self-select friends who will understand and empathize with our point of view, with our efforts at safety, with our efforts to protect ourselves. And people will just tell you that, yes, that sounds really hard. That's tough. And I'm sorry. And I'll pray for your spouse. Whatever it is. And so it's easy to create this environment of fear. I know guys do this with each other, and women do this with themselves as well. That it's easy to get into a place of complaining and talking and just normalizing our reaction of withdrawal and disconnect.
All right. So we're going to talk about a couple of lies, fear-filled lies to unmask. And the first one is that only one person gets to be powerful at a time in any given relationship. This has sort of been a game changer for me. When I started to realize this, I think, Danny Silk talks about how we learn this little, right? Depending on the house you grew up in, depending on what happened there, it was pretty clear who was in charge and who you had to kind of accommodate, right? And so if you learned as a little kid that only one person gets to be powerful in a relationship at a time, this is hard for you to get over, right? I had a hard time seeing this sometimes because my parents did share power pretty well in the family I grew up in. But when my dad did get angry, and I don't want to say he was angry all the time, he wasn't, but when that happened, everybody else had to back off, right? Or at least that's the way we did it in our house, and kind of pacify and make sure. So I struggle with that to this day. If people are angry, I want to back out. and I want to just kind of get small and let them have their experience, and then we'll get back to it after you calm down. You probably have experienced this at work, all kinds of ways that people take control of a situation, and but if you're lucky, you've also experienced some work environment or some home environment where even if there's a person in charge, right, they're sharing that power and they are honestly welcoming feedback. And that makes it a safe place for everybody. And so in that environment, everybody is powerful, right? Everybody is treated as a powerful, important person. We just had dinner Friday night with our son and daughter-in-law, and our daughter-in-law was just talking about this. She loves her supervisor at her new job, and she was going on and on about this. And I was like, this is exactly what she's talking about. That supervisor is making it safe for everybody. And so we want you to think about this, whether you can see this or not, that in the world in general, right, people who are powerful kind of push their way, and everybody else kind of figures out where they fit in. But Jesus said, this is the way the world does it, but it's not so with you. He says this to the disciples when they're kind of posturing who's going to be most important. He's like, no, not here, not in the body of Christ. The person who's the most powerful is going to be serving, right? That's who our God is. Even with Adam and Eve, right? He had all the power, but he gave them a choice. He wanted them he knew that love was voluntary. He wanted them also to choose, and to choose powerfully, to be living that way. So the second one, you want to just put that up for a minute, is that if you believe you can be controlled, you will also control others. This works the other way too. Maybe you relate to it better if you say, if you believe you can control others, you will also believe you can be controlled in the right situation. So this is actually probably layered into all of us. You probably have to work at seeing this if you've never seen this before. But you actually, in a powerful relationship, you both share power, right? I'm not saying who's the boss or any of that, but we're both serving each other. And I get to stay powerful even if I'm scared. I get to stay powerful even if I'm angry. I get to stay powerful because this is what God offers to me.
Yeah, we really have. We back and forth for at least 2 or 3 years, I think. And just examining the ways in which either one of us reacts powerlessly. That was from a couple weeks ago for the first couple chapters, versus in a victim mentality, looking for a rescuer and a bad guy, to living powerfully and not trying to solve each other's problems, but just trying to listen and to understand and find ways that we can help each other with our problems, whether it's something between us or something with the kids or anywhere else in life. So the point, the thing that we want to see about fear is that fear reacts to pain and seeks to control people or situations for the goal of a safe distance, which is completely, diametrically, 180 degrees opposite of God's Hesed love. God, in his Hesed love, responds to the pain of our broken relationship with him and our rebellion with him by seeking freedom for us through Christ for the goal of connection. God's love responds to pain and seeks freedom for the goal of connection. So one aspect, we just want to look at that, think about that with you for a few minutes, each one of those. Learning to respond and not react. We want to learn to train our minds to think, our wills to choose, and our bodies to obey. In Christ, God trains us. Now, I can think about my relationship with Carla. Jesus is teaching me to repudiate the thought that Carla is just whatever I fill in the blank, too emotional, too demanding. God is teaching me to choose to move toward her for understanding and connection instead of building a safe wall, building distance, and trying to control her. He's teaching me, training my mind that it's a lie when I tell myself this is just too hard. Have you ever felt that about marriage? This is just too hard. That's a response of fear. The response of love is God in me, the hope of glory, God's power changes that and trains me to respond differently. Or that I'm a victim, or that I deserve better. Have you ever felt like you deserve better than what you're currently experiencing? So God trains us to repudiate that and to live in the power of His love and His Spirit. It's actively pursuing connection with her when I can't really, I may not be able to see the point. I may not understand. But if I perceive that Carla's in distress for whatever reason, the goal of love is to pursue understanding, because that's what God has done for me in Christ. Amazing.
Okay, so we're about out of time here, but we're going to unpack this. You might be saying, okay, that all sounds good, but how do I do that, right? How do I do that? And we are going to spend the weeks we do this in April, we're going to really get into how do I do that? How do I stay powerful in conflict? How do I communicate in conflict? But this is maybe more just like kind of a brain shift, a paradigm shift. But if you can pursue love in the middle of whatever it is that's going on, you will create around you an environment of safety, right? Love creates freedom and safety, which is what you're actually looking for when you pull away, right? But you can actually create it when you realize you don't need everybody to be exactly like you. You're loved the way you are, as Dave Dravecki said this morning, right? You're loved. I'm loved. Graham is also loved. And Graham is loved by unconditional love. So I can move toward him even when he's so different from me, right? Even when the difference, it seems overwhelming to me. So God delights in me, God loves me, and I hope that Graham will also delight in me and love me. That is certainly the goal, and we often have that. But even if I don't feel like he's delighting in me right now, right, I can remember who I am and who he is. My sister, who teaches in Japan and has for many years, she had a coworker for a few years who she was so amazed by this. Our whole family is a little bit avoidant. If there's conflict, we all avoid, right? And this coworker, when there was an argument or somebody would get into it, she would like literally lean in. This astonished my sister. She would be like, "Ooh, this is the good part," she says, "because this means we're going to learn something new." And Kim was like, "Wow, there's a paradigm, right?" So you can create that environment of freedom around you as you learn to speak affirming words, as you learn to see each other as you are, see each other through God's eyes, and start to learn to give real good information about who you are on the inside, which we will talk about in April. So as we've already said, the fruit of the Spirit is, we all know the beginning ones, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control, right? I think sometimes we don't get all the way to the end down there when we're doing them in our heads. We're thinking about love and kindness and you should be patient with me. And but what God says he will work in you is self-control, right? You're the only person you have any control over is yourself. But if I can control myself, I can create the best possible environment that maybe Graham can also bring his best self to the relationship and vice versa, as he often does for me.
I want to comment on the significance of that, creating an environment of freedom. One of the ways that Carla has loved me so much is being patient to facilitate a conversation of why I get so mad. I don't think I would have discovered what I've and maybe there's likely more that I still need to discover. I don't think I would have discovered what I've discovered thus far about fear in my heart if it weren't for Carla's deliberate, intentional effort to create freedom for me to do that without fear of judgment from her. So I discovered that one of my big fears is rejection from her because of my family background. And if I feel like she's getting upset, or I feel like she doesn't appreciate the hard work that I'm putting in to our relationship, I can really freak out. It is a scary place. And so now, because God's love in and through Carla, I know something better about myself and my weaknesses and my fears. And I tell you, it is so liberating. It's like it's not hidden anymore. It's not hidden in my own heart. It's something that I understand better. It's something that Carla understands better. It's absolutely amazing how God works in us and through us by His Spirit when we will partner with Him in love. But one of our favorite quotes, I would say our very favorite quote from Danny Silk, is this one right here. The only person you can control on a good day is yourself. If we could just embrace this and put it on your bathroom window or wherever you put stuff that you want to remember, blazon it on your heart, this is a good one. And so I just commend it to you and spend time talking about the significance of it. The only person you can control on a good day is yourself. So we want to end by encouraging all of us, challenging all of us, that the takeaway that we hope for in this chapter, in understanding something about that there is a battle between fear and love in our own hearts. There is a battle in our own hearts between fear and love that gets played out in our relationships, and that if we will train ourselves by God, we want to control ourselves toward connection. Control ourselves toward connection. That is supernatural. It comes. This is not earthly. This comes from God, but He delights in it so much. This is His character. I mean, look at that and just think about God and what He's done in human history. God controls Himself toward redemption, toward salvation, toward the gathering of a church for His own glory and His own pleasure and the building of His kingdom. God is relentless to this thesis. He controls Himself toward connection. And so that's what He calls us to, not just in our marriages, but with our children, with our coworkers, with our neighbors, with people at the table that we're here now. And so really that's the thesis. The takeaway question for each one of us is, how powerful are you willing to be? How much of God's power that is infinite are you willing to walk in this afternoon and this evening and this coming week? Anticipating whatever that hardship is, with a hard conversation with a spouse or at work or whatever it is. There's the question. How powerful are you willing to be? To become. Maybe that's a better word, is just to say to become. So that's chapter 3. We with the notes that you have, there's I think there's 2 pages of notes. The next page are some discussion questions for your tables. We've got 30 minutes to have some time for discussion, and then the very last page is some individual homework that you can think about, read the scriptures, pray, just allow yourself to be trained by God for the transformation that will lead to this, controlling yourself toward connection. So Lord bless you guys, and we'll see you in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Oh, wait, you want to make a plug for the book?
Does anybody need it? Does anybody still need this? Does everybody here have a copy somewhere? Okay.
We've got a few extra copies.
We've got extras.
All right. Thank you guys. Enjoy your time.